Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. All right, good. I can hear myself. That's a good thing. Hey, you guys having a good time so far? Wow. This is one of my favorite events every year to come to because it's just so much fun and they do a great job with everything out there. So I wanted to talk to you today about one of my favorite topics, being able to code efficiently and effectively with whatever tools that you like to use. So this is all about being one with Angular, and Angular is one with me, because the right tools can make a huge difference when you're coding. If you use the wrong tools, it kind of can slow you down. If you don't have the right things can be kind of complicated in life, right? So what tools do I like to use? I like to use the Angular CLI. Angular CLI is wicked awesome. Yeah, let's give it up. Give it up. I like to use VS Code, but any of your favorite editors will work. I like a quick, fast editor. Yeah, VS Code's awesome. I love using snippets. Anybody who's ever seen me code and you don't know I'm using snippets, you're like, wow, how's he code so fast? Snippets rock. Anything you got to do over and over again, absolutely use them. There's a new language service the Angular team has put out, I think yesterday. That's freaking awesome. It's awesome. I'm going to show you that today because in the templates, it helps you see errors that you've got in the HTML. And then, I like to build up web servers, but quite frankly, I'm a front-end developer, and I like to focus on the UI. So if I can spin up quick web APIs in the back end, I like to use serverless functions. So I choose to use Azure there. We're going to take a look at how all these things can go together to build some really cool stuff. And when you do that, it's pretty amazing what you can do all by yourself. So the Angular CLI makes everything really easy, which is nice. And it might put us all out of jobs pretty soon. Thank you very much, guys. The CLI is awesome. It does a lot of great stuff, but it's more than just creating code, because anybody can write code. But writing it well and following good practices, that's really hard sometimes. Maybe you want to follow the Angular style guide that we have up on the docs. The CLI is going to help you there. But first, you need to learn how to install the CLI. Thankfully, just one simple step is going to do that. So npm install, grab it locally, you've got the CLI. Next, you're off to the races. We might create a new app. ng-new is your friend. ng-new, create a new app. Easy to go. Sticks it in that folder. You can also use my favorite flag, dry run. The dry run flag lets you practice. How often do you create something with a generator and you're like, oh, I didn't want those 892 files? It's kind of nice to know what it's going to create sometimes. So the dry run flag's your friend. And then maybe you're at a place where npm install's taken like 180 days. So you want to use skip install. It's great to sometimes generate the code and then later use npm install or switch to yarn. The CLI supports both. So what do I like to do? I like to roll with this kind of a command. I create a new app. I tell it I'm going to have routing in there at some point very soon. So add the routing features right out of the gate. Because as we all know, routing is awesome, but it takes a few things to kind of hook it up. The CLI does that. I also change my prefix for my components right away to whatever my prefix is going to be. Maybe I want to roll with Sass. I can set that up right out of the gate as well. And then I do the dry run. The dry run will show me what are you going to create, and I can verify it's going to do what I'm expecting it to do. And then once it's happy, I remove that dry run flag. And then I run it again. So let's take a look at kind of how this works. All right. So if we flip over to an empty application, what we could do is we could bump up to running into a new folder. And I'll go into one called play. Everybody should have a playtime folder. So we create a new app here. I can call it my app. And I can put a bunch of flags in here. Maybe I want to do routing in this application. Maybe I want a prefix to be, I don't know, rogue 1. Maybe I want to do something else like skipping installs, or I want to do a dry run to check it out. So I can run dry run like this. And I can say, all right, what's that going to create? Now, you'll notice it created things really fast, but right away it tells me at the top, you specified dry run, so you're not actually writing any files. And that's why it's wicked fast, but it shows you kind of what it's going to look like. See the app routing module up there? That's cool. It's going to create the app routing module. It's going to pull in the routing module into your application and get us ready to go. So when it's time to run it, I can take that flag off if I want, or I can run it with skip install. So by running it with skip install, it'll generate the application, but won't run npm install, and then I can open up my favorite code editor. And then over in VS Code, I look at the application. You can see I've got an app routing module. I'd have to add my own paths. I've got my base module here. Who doesn't love setting up their ng module at the root, CLI sets it up for us. And then it's got all the karma and the end-to-end testing and everything else out of the box that we want. And if I want to change any defaults, I can hop into the Angular CLI JSON file. And in here, for example, if I'm running like ASP.NET on the back end or Spring or something else, and it requires a different root folder for my source code, I can change these things. So all this stuff is customizable inside this configuration file, which is pretty nice. So you're not boxed into following everything to the letter. We do have some control. So let's say we have this app, and I have another app already that's npm installed, just to save time in life. Let's close that. Oops. Hey, that worked. CC's like extra code. So over here, we've got a new editor, and I've got a little application. And in my application, don't open that, I have a bunch of files. And just to save a little bit of time, I added a few extra files to this application. So this application here, if we jump back out to, yep, that's the one. We jump back out to here. Let's run this real quick. First thing I like to do when I get an app is I like to run ng-serve-o. Serve-o means I'm going to build my application, and then I'm going to open it in the browser. So when I run this, it's going to build the app, it's going to compile it, and the port's already in use. That's always a good thing to check, by the way. Let's do that. And maybe it's this one. Hey, there he is. And we'll go back. By the way, you can specify a different port, which is nice, so it kind of tells you that there. So we build the application, it'll launch it in the browser once it's ready to go, and then we can flip back to terminal to kind of see the progress. It's building out any chunks, it's actually looking for any lazy loaded modules for us, which is cool, and then the application can launch and run. So that's cool, but how do we build things up? If we look back at our app, we've got a bunch of empty folders in here. We can delete some of those. And inside of our application, let's say we wanted to add a bunch of features. So our app's still running. I keep it running in the background. We're still running over there. I can refresh it just to make sure. We go back into the code. Let's say we want to add a navigation bar. So since you guys don't want to watch me type styles, I added a few styles to this app in advance. And I can type in here ng-generate nav, component nav, and that'll generate a new component. I'm extremely lazy. My friend Ward Bell likes to tell me, no, I'm efficient. So I don't like to type that. I type ng-gc-nav. And you see what it tells me up there. Create those 4 files, and we can customize that. Maybe you really don't like testing. We can tell it don't use specs by default. We can tell it put the inline styles for Sass or for HTML. And notice that yellow line, update app module. What do you think that's doing? Yeah, what do we always forget to do when we create a new component? Declare it inside the module, right? So the CLI folks said, hey, that would be really cool if we could set that up for you. So let's take a look at what that did. We come over here to the nav bar. It created a little navigation bar. It gave us our component template right out of the box. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of a nav bar to it. This is where snippets really are nice. See how fast I type? Snippets are awesome. All right, now that we have a nav bar, don't believe me on what it added. Notice the declaration right there for the app component and the nav. Sweet. Now let's go to the app component. I don't really want that title anymore. Let's go ahead and add a nav. Actually, I think it's called a row nav. And we'll add that right there. And then once we add those, we go back to our application, and we refresh. There's our nav. Not too shabby, huh? Pretty easy to get out of the box, up and running inside the application. So let's say we want to do some other stuff too. So over here, let's say we create a list of rebels, because we like rebels, right? We got to have like Jin or so and some other folks in there. So we can say ng-gc, and we'll create a rebels component. All right, it's going to add that component. It's also going to declare it inside of our module. Well, I also like to create models for us. I want to create a rebel model. So I can say ng class, or CL for class, and then I could say rebel. It's going to add that single file with a class there called rebel. That's cool. And maybe I want to create a data service so I can go hit like an Azure function up on the web. So I can say ng service, or just S. You catching a trend here with the aliases? Pretty easy. It's kind of nice to do. Dash data. Now, with services, what is the thing we always forget to do with services in Angular? Yeah, provide them. So you have to provide your services. We always get that really cool error message inside the browser that says, hey, you know, I really like you, but you forgot to provide your service somewhere. Could you please go do that? So if I do this with a dry run flag, -d is an abbreviation for it, it'll warn me and say, John, and I'll say, yeah, CLI? And CLI will say, you forgot to provide it. So now I can go back in there and I can say, -m, please put it in the app module. Now notice what it's going to try to generate with a dry run. There's a new command at the bottom, update app module. Now is that cool or what? We can add and provide services on the fly. So let's let it happen. Okay, cool. The other cool thing is we look over at the Git changes and we can see all the files we just generated. All that stuff out of the box, ready to go. We can look at what app module looks like. It imported the files that we needed. It declared the components. It provided the services. Angular is so happy right now. All right. So then we can go and we can write some code. Let's say I want to get a list of rebels. I could create a constructor. And what do our rebels need? Let's say they need an ID. Everybody needs an ID, right? And we'll create a public ID. That's in the wrong place. There we go. And then we can create a public name. And let's give them a home world because every rebel has to come from somewhere. And that will be a number. Cool. So once we get our rebel up there, then we want to go over to our rebels component. And again, you get to watch me type a lot of fun. Oops, wrong one. RO. Rebels. I love snippets, by the way. Have I told you that yet? Now, there's a lot of red stuff here. Why do you think that's red? Yeah, there's something wrong. So this is all red because the language services that is an extension of VS Code are telling me I can't find those things in your component. So we can go add those things, right? So we can go back to our component. We can type in rebels TS, go down to the component, and we could add all of those features. Now, just to save a little bit of time here, I'm going to go ahead and whip over to a completed solution because we're kind of getting this sense of how this is all going to play out. So let's close that one down. We'll close that. Terminate. We'll open a new terminal. All of this code is up on GitHub, by the way, so you can check it out. We'll show you some examples later of where to get that. And we'll open this up. So here's a completed solution. In the end, we'll have the app with rebels in there. And inside of our rebels, you'll notice we're calling out to a service to go off to Azure to get our data. We can click in to what the service does. So that's really cool. By holding down the command key, you can navigate around the application. You can use command PP to go back to the previous thing that you were on. So you can toggle back and forth. And you can even get IntelliSense as you're typing in here, which is really nice. So when we run this app now, we say ng-serve o, or again, I'm lazy, ng-serve o, like that. It's going to compile the application, build it up, and serve it in the browser. Now, there's something really interesting about this application. With Angular JS, I would argue that it's extremely difficult to get lazy loading to work. Lazy loading was not easy with that. With Angular, it's easy. I mean, like really easy. And you're like thinking, well, it's easy like, you know, a week or easy like a Sunday morning. Well, more like the latter. So in this application, the planet screen is lazy loaded. So when I click on planets, it's going to go across the wire. Let's go over to the network tab and zoom that in. Move that over. We'll go to our all traffic. We'll refresh real quick, run the rebels. There's all of our data coming across. When I click on planets, notice there's a new chunk coming across. The Angular CLI automatically detected I was using a lazy loaded route. And it created a code split bundle and then loaded it on the fly. Like no effort on my part whatsoever to do this. That is awesome. You're thinking, how does that work, John? And I'm like, I'll tell you, hold on. So right here, we got an eagerly loaded rebels component, and then we've got a lazy loaded planets component. We simply use the string syntax because we have to use a string because you can't have a symbol, because otherwise it would be eagerly loaded. So we simply do that, and the Angular CLI is going to detect this, figure it out, and then load it for us, which is just wicked cool. So what if you forget how to write paths? Anybody ever here forget how to write the paths and the syntax? I do. I forget everything. So let's say you wanted to write this too. We can use some snippets out of the box, and one of those snippets is route default path. I like that. What if you want an eagerly loaded path? Okay, do a-eager like that. Well, really you do. A-eager. There we go, route path eager. It sets that up, and I can set up a new path with some other component. I can also set up a lazy component, so I don't have to worry about the syntax. I'm faster than the thing. There we go. So some other route over here, and I can put in app, foo, whatever, in my name of my module. So what's cool about these snippets is you don't have to remember all the syntax. And these are free. You can get these off of the VS Code Marketplace. Very, very effective. And everything you do with these snippets, they are all following the Angular style guide, and the CLI is hand in hand with the style guide as well. So all that stuff kind of gets detected for you. Now let's say you really like Webpack. I mean, you're Sean Larkin. You love Webpack. See Sean Larkin this week. Tell him how much you love it. He's awesome. He works on that team. So let's say you're loving Webpack, and you're looking down here at your code, and you don't see Webpack, but you know it's in there because John Papa told you so. But you're like, where is it? Well, it's there. There's an awesome, awesome command in the CLI. This is my favorite feature of the CLI, and it's what won me over. Because sometimes you build apps, and you're like, you know what? I like what it's doing, but I want to add one little tweak to the build process. How do I get control of that? Don't you hate when tools stop you from doing that? CLI says, we ain't playing that game. You can eject, the best named command ever, by the way. I'm loving the visuals in my head right now. You can eject from the Webpack from the CLI, and it warns you and tells you what's going on. So what this is doing, and I like to commit my changes first so I can show you what's happening, it's saying, look, you're not going to be able to run the build or the serve the way you did before because you've just ejected the Webpack stuff. But we've given you NPM scripts that you can run that'll still do the job. So let's go look at what it actually did. First, inside the JSON, it did something really complicated. It had a property saying you ejected. Then the package JSON, it added those scripts. So you can learn how to, okay, not ng build, now you can run npm run build for Webpack. And then it added a bunch of packages. So all those dependencies were under the covers before. Now you can see what those are. And then you can have a lot of fun with a third file it changed. It added in the Webpack file. Oh boy! So now I'll have Deb Carrata come up and read every line to you and explain it. By the way, why did I do this with Git, right? So I could reverse when I'm done. So what I did here, and I'm going to make this deck available to you all afterwards so you can see all the commands that are in here, because there's just so many awesome commands. But I wanted to show you kind of a summary of what happens throughout this. Because the really cool thing about the CLI is that it's not that it's taking your job, right? It's taking away the monotony of our jobs. It's getting rid of the boilerplate, and it's making it easier to work with. And not only that, but when I build, has anybody here heard of AOT? Right? We just all heard of that, right? How can only 10 people raise their hands? They were here for the last hour. So I know it's a thing because Igor told me. So AOT, right? You want to learn how that works. You want to build it into your app. You want to build your apps the most optimized way possible. The CLI just does it for you. As Angular gets faster and faster and faster, the CLI will evolve and do those things for you so you don't get left behind. That's cool. That's really cool. We never had this with Angular JS. Angular JS, there were like 800,000 seed projects, right? Which one are you using? I don't know. So what's the ROI? Why should we use this? Generate code fast and correctly. We want to follow the style guide and deviate where we need to. Efficient development and debugging experience helps us go through the process. You can actually debug end-to-end tests and debug unit tests with it as well. It's an awesome build process. We get testing right out of the box because the hard part about testing isn't running it or writing tests. It's setting up the configuration. And we get an easy exit strategy, or eject as they call it, which I love. And when you do all of these things, it's great. Now, I want to take one quick moment to thank the Angular CLI and the Style Guide core teams. Hans, Philippe, Sumit, Mike, Minko, Ward, and Igor. They are fantastic. If you have a problem with the CLI, you just go up on GitHub, you search the issues, create a new one if you need to. Those guys are great. Quick hand for them. These guys are awesome. This guy's awesome too, and this is who you could be if you use the CLI. And if you want to get links to any of the stuff we talked about, the CLI is up here, the 2 different language services, and the snippets that I use, you can get them up at this short link. You can learn how Azure Functions work by clicking on here. And the source code for both the app I showed and the Azure Functions are up in GitHub right now. And by the way, I could talk for like 2 hours and 26 minutes and 14 seconds about the CLI, but I don't have time. So if you want to hear me do that, you can check out my course, which came out today. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great time at the conference.